Fantasy Sports Corp and Underdog Fantasy have teamed up to start your fantasy season off in the win column with Best Ball. What is Best Ball? It's quite simply the easiest way to win. No team management, no trades, no waivers. It's their biggest contest ever and it has only gotten bigger. You simply have to sit and win. You don't even have to set your lineup. Always get your best score every week. Just enter a contest, draft your team, and Underdog will do the rest. What could make this even better? How about free money, up to $100 using our exclusive promo code? Go online now and use the promo code InjuredList to double your deposit up to $100. You tell them Gingerbread sent you. Good girl.
Special shout out to today's episode to SeatGeek. We recently partnered with them to become a brand ambassador. What does that mean? Well, for you, it means you get a special discount when you make your first ticket purchase with SeatGeek. With my code InjuredListPod, you will get $20 off your first purchase with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a ticket purchasing app that takes all the confusion out of buying tickets to your favorite sports, concert events, and more. They score each ticket on a scale of 1 to 10 to help you know if you're getting a good deal. Green is good, red is bad. My followers get $20 off their first ticket purchase using my code InjuredListPod. Click on the link in the show notes and browse for your favorite events. Your next big night ever is waiting, and they have the tickets.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of the Injured List podcast, Brian Scott.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Once again, we've got an amazing guest on the podcast this evening. Without further ado, I'm going to bring him up to the stage, ladies and gentlemen. Let's welcome in Mike Hollis, former NFL kicker, Pro Bowler for the Jacksonville Jaguars, one of the original members of the team, in fact, when the organization was formed in the mid-90s. Mike, thanks for joining us here on the podcast.
Thank you, Brian. Glad to be here.
So, Mike, let's take it back several years, maybe more than that, but to when you got picked up by the Jacksonville Jaguars as a signing, a free agent signing, if I'm not mistaken, out of college. You were in Washington at the time?
Idaho.
And originally from Idaho, right? I'm sorry, you played at Idaho too. Take us back to that time in your life, how you got on the team as a kicker, if that's something you did before. As most kickers, sometimes they come from another sport. I don't know what your background is there. Enlighten us.
Well, yeah, you're right. Most kickers are soccer players. That's kind of where my background of kicking a ball started. And, I kind of always had kind of a strong leg. I was always the one that did like the penalty shots and stuff like that. But, I played, since I was like 12 years old or so, somewhere in that area. A lot of neighborhood kids that were very active. And so my whole neighborhood growing up was full of a bunch of athletes. And so we just had a lot of fun doing all kinds of crazy stuff, which actually is part of my back issues initially, just, snow skiing and things like that. So that's really kind of where it started. But yeah, playing soccer and enjoying football, watching football as a kid too. And when I played in middle school, we had a lightweight and heavyweight team. So I was a small guy, so I was clearly on the lightweight team, and I played other positions. So I wasn't, I was playing against guys that were my size, so I wasn't too worried about getting beat up too bad. But when I went to high school, it was, free for all. So it was all, everyone in the school can play football no matter what weight you are. So I didn't play my first year. Then I had a brother that was at the school and said, we have a guy on the team that's just a kicker. Why don't you just try that? And I didn't think that was possible. I thought we had to play something else. And so I tried out and made the team in high school, and then, did pretty well in high school. I actually, the name's Jason Hansen, the kicker for Detroit Lions for many, many years. His brother, Travis Hansen, was my age. We all grew up in the same area, Spokane, Washington, right? So I played against them in both soccer and football, but Travis was my age. Jason was a couple years older. And when it came time to recruiting out of high school, I was a better kicker between Travis and I. But I think because of his name and his brother, of course, I think he got a little bit of a better opportunity to go on to a full ride scholarship to University of Washington. Plus, he was a smarter guy. I wasn't incredibly intelligent. My grades were not even good enough for University of Washington, although it is a pretty prestigious school. But so I went on to junior college for 2 years and did pretty well there as a blue chip All-American my first year, and then did pretty good my second year. And then I found myself in the same kind of situation I did coming out of high school. Was like I was looking for colleges to go to, and nobody was offering any scholarships. So I ended up basically kind of walking on at University of Idaho, and where they had actually a scholarship available if I could beat the guy out. And so that's what I did. And University of Idaho is only an hour and a half southeast from my hometown of Spokane, so close to home, and a dome too, which was nice. I played indoors. But
that always helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as kickers love indoors. Plus, with my back and dealing with cold weather, it wasn't as bad. But we did play in Montana State, and Weber, and places that were kind of cold. So, but then I did fairly well at University of Idaho, and I had pretty strong leg, and statistically field goals I wasn't the greatest, but I had some power, and that got me noticed, and I got on with the Chargers actually in preseason '94, and then. Eventually, after convincing Tom Coughlin that I wasn't too short to kick a football, I actually had to work out for them twice for the Jaguars, and eventually got on training camp, of course. And then I beat out Scott Sisson, who was the kicker that they were kind of thinking would be the guy because he was a veteran, and I was just still a first year player, a free agent, basically a rookie. But then rest is history, basically.
Awesome. And now you've kind of hinted a little bit about your back, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But what I first want to touch on is maybe you can help us dispel some of the myths that surround kickers and their athleticism and their prowess or lack thereof on the field. But also, I want you to touch upon the mental aspect, because I feel like there's plenty of people out there that probably have a strong leg and can kick a ball quite far. But when you're talking about getting to that elite level of being a professional NFL kicker, you just have to have a certain mindset and be able to basically tune out all this stuff around you in order to focus on what you're doing. And it's not just like once a game to make the game winning. It's literally every single kick. So if you can, dispel some of the myths surrounding kickers and how you were able to kind of basically black out everything around you and focus on your task and be so successful at it, because you did it for 9+ years at a Pro Bowl level.
Yeah, the myths behind kickers. There's that kind of that saying that kickers are a little quirky, they're weird. Yes and no. I mean, I've seen it. I've been coaching for 18 years now. I coach kickers. I got my own academy here in Jacksonville, of course, but I've seen it with some of the guys that I've coached as well. But it's kind of that it's weird that kickers are kind of labeled as weird because of the mental side of it. They're kind of like a mental head case when it comes to games, and it's tough to deal with pressure situations. But I wasn't that person at all. And ask any teammate of mine on any teams that I played on, they would be the first one to tell you that I was a normal guy. I'm a team player. I participate in a lot of the the workouts and lifting things, and I'm always there with the team and doing things with the team as a team. So when it comes to the mental side, and the reason why a lot of kickers are a little bit strange in a sense is because they think too much about the kick, on game day. And that's really what the hardest thing for a kicker to do is, and this is going to be very strange for you to hear this, but is to not care where the ball goes. You have to have the ability not to care so much, because when you care too much, you do stuff, and that's when you get mentally shot, because you're trying too hard. And when you're at a level of football, at the highest level of football in the world, and you've done things repetitiously day in and day out on the football field of practice, why would you want to do anything different on game day? Why would you be? Well, yes, we're all nervous. There might be guys like Adam Vinatieri that weren't nervous at all, but I'm sure there was still some nervousness, within him. But on game days, it's a little challenging because you have to convince yourself that you don't need to do anything more than you had in practice. It's a very, very tough thing to do because now it counts. And that's where really I'm going with this whole process of the mental side of it, is because when it counts, that's when they shrivel up and do things differently, or, second guess themselves, or they have a little bit of lack of confidence, or whatever the case may be. But here's the thing too, is like, I've had the question about, how do you treat a game winning field goal? What's going through your mind? I'm like, well, yeah, I understand what the consequence will be if I make or miss this kick, but I can't treat it any differently than the first extra point of the game. I can't do anything different. That's the luxury of kickers we have, is that if you do it properly, if you think about this, you don't have to kick a football differently based on where you are on the field. Now, yes, when you get back to 50 plus, there might be some, a little bit of incentive to put something more into it, but you still have to control that without getting out of control and getting too erratic with that. But my point really is that, as a kicker, you don't get penalized if you kick a field goal too far. All it has to do is go through the pipes and over the crossbar. Yep. So why would you kick an extra point just barely, just tapping an extra point and then kicking a longer field goal really hard? Or, there's 2 different, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of kicks that you're going to be working on based on where you are on the field. And that's really not the best way to do it. You want to just work on one and kick it the same way, regardless of how far you are from the goalpost, and really kind of more or less regardless about with the conditions too. I mean, I've played on really bad fields. Yeah, you're kind of conscious of the footing, but you can't think about that because, again, it takes your mind off what it is you're trying to do, and you're going to do something different, kick it carefully or whatever. You just have to have confidence in your footing, like wear the right shoes. Now, sometimes you will slip. It just happens. But my point really is that you shouldn't really do much different on any kick. You got to treat them all the same, regardless of the conditions.
Yeah, I mean, great points you bring up there. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle probably in that regard, is, letting that seep into your mind that this is a big kick, or I'm in a different arena, different stadium, different environment, the weather, letting all these other factors, external factors, kind of come into your mind that make you alter your technique, your approach. And like you said, kicking a ball through the uprights really shouldn't be any different no matter where you are in a field. Maybe just a little bit extra oomph behind it, or a little bit extra juice, but otherwise the technique itself is the same. So what tips, I mean, and I'm assuming, like, in your current practice with the kicking academy, you're doing a lot of technique training and things like that. But how much of your training with these kickers are you doing on the mental side? Do you also help them with that as well?
Well, that comes hand in hand with the form, because the only mental advice that I give these kickers is learn the form, and then here's the mental side is trust the form. And if you can just learn the form and get good at the technique and everything about it, which is, it can be some challenging for some kids, but my point is really, when you get something down that you can repeat over and over and over again, why would you have to worry too much about, the result? And again, where I'm going with this is, there's a lot of kickers out there that are result driven, meaning they here's a classic example. How many times you see a kicker, which probably every single time, and I did it, but not nearly as bad as a lot of guys do still to this day. When they line up, they're looking up at the goalpost, they're looking down at the ball, looking up the goalpost, looking down at the ball. They're convincing themselves that this ball I'm about to kick needs to go there. And they're looking at somebody a fan sitting in the back of the end zone there behind the goalpost that's a target for them to hit. And they're trying to kick that ball to that person really that's behind the goalpost, right? But it's kind of, you have to get to a point where you don't care really where, once you line up and once you get your position where you're going to start your approach from, the lineup gives you the angle that you need. It gives you the distance from the ball and you. So if you do the lineup properly, all you got to do now is, and I refer to it as pull the trigger. All you have to do is just go. When the ball is snapped, you go and you do everything that you've practiced. You don't, obviously, when you practice it a lot and you're good at it, you don't have to think about all the little details. So it becomes habitual. So you've developed these good habits that you, again, can trust. And so, then in games, and that's really the hardest part about the mental side that I'm teaching, is the fact that you have to test yourself. When do you actually test your trust in your form? Like what period of time in your development of kicking does that happen? It's different for everybody. obviously in practice when you're kicking on your own, it's easy to not care where the ball goes because it doesn't count, especially if no one's watching. You don't care if you make it or miss it. You just want to, I'm just going to see what my form does when I kick this ball. Wow, it worked, you kick a good ball and it went through really well, right? So then you start to see, okay, well, if I just do the form, the ball will go. Next test is in front of coaches who are charting you or something where, you're in a competition or something, or for the young guys at one of these showcase camps. Well, now it matters. Now it counts. Can you trust your form in those situations? And you think to yourself, well, why wouldn't I trust my form? Because I was doing it, last month and the month before, I was doing really good. Why would I distrust my form now and get rid of that mentality where I don't care where the ball goes because my form is so good? Then of course, then you get good at that. Then you transfer that into actual games. And that's the hardest part there is the fact that going back to my original comment is like, when do you actually trust? When do you test yourself on trusting your form when you're in a game? Like where I actually do virtual coaching with a lot of guys and sometimes I've told them, like I asked them specifically, like, who are you playing this week? And, oh, we're playing such and such team and we're going to just totally dominate them. I'm like, great. You know what? Here's a great opportunity for you. When you get to a position where you're up by 40 or 50 or whatever you think you're going to be up by, why don't you just test your form that time? The next extra point that you kick, just say, you know what, screw it. I don't care if I make this. I don't care if I miss it. I don't care. I'm going to trust my form and I'm going to rely just on my form. I'm going to finish the kick. I'm going to do everything that I've done in practice and not care at all. And more times than not, clearly, I think I'm batting 1,000 right now because every time they say that they've done that, they're like, it surprises them. Like, I had no idea I could kick a ball that good. It was so unbelievable. And so once you start getting those, that's where the mental side is already taken care of. I've never had a sports psychologist. I've never had anybody to kind of, to help calm me down before games. I've never sought any advice for game day preparation mentally. I've never done that. I never had to because it had everything to do with my form and my trust in my form.
It almost became robotic for you. It was such muscle memory involved and all that stuff. You trained so much, you repeated that action so many times, it just became automatic, I assume, to some degree.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it's supposed to do.
A lot of kickers I've encountered throughout my career, because before I was a PA, I was an athletic trainer and I worked the sideline a few games or two. I noticed a lot of kickers were very superstitious. Did you have any superstitions or any pregame routines or things that you would do maybe that we might not have noticed out in the field that kind of got you prepped or ready to do a kick or before game?
Not really. I think that the biggest thing is just the routine part. You just want to do things that are normal in games. Like for example, maybe a timeout. If a timeout is called before an important kick, most kickers stay on the field. They're testing the wind. They're looking at their plant foot. They're you don't have that opportunity normally. So why would you? Do you think that's an advantage? And by the way, the wind is never the same where you're kicking it and the end of the end of the field there at the goalpost. It's always different depending on what stadium you're in, obviously. But don't ever rely on the wind where you're at right there on the field. That's one piece of advice I would give kickers now. But that's the thing too, is you just have to just go with the flow and just and what I would do, going back to your question, I would actually, if a timeout was taken, I would actually go back to the sideline, might take a little sip of water or whatever, kind of, jump up and down maybe. I don't think I'd never had time to really kick one in the net. I didn't want to deal with that. But I did tell a coach, I told coaches that, listen, when you think it's time for me to run on the field, just call field goal again, yell out field goal, field goal. So it kind of puts me in that rhythm, like, okay, here we go. Here's a field goal. And that's just a certain routine and a time that it takes to get out there, get lined up. The only difference is the referees sometimes take their time to blow the whistle, and that's a little bit of a delay, but try to make it as most routine or normal as you possibly can. One other thing I didn't like to do, which I've done before, and especially if I had one superstition thing, that if I had a bad warm up, I would retie my kicking shoe. Okay. I didn't like to even retie my kicking shoe. I wore the same shoe for the entire 4 or 5 hours, however long the games were. I kept that tight shoe on my right foot. That's probably why I have arthritis in my big toe on my right foot, because like my right toe is always smashed in there.
Yep.
But I never liked to retie my shoe unless I was having a bad warm up or something went wrong. You know what? I'm like, well, I'm going to change my luck here. I'm going to retie my shoe. I don't really honestly remember if it worked or not. That tells you how silly that superstition was.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure, though, subconsciously it made a difference.
Yeah.
Now, with the advent of social media these days, which was not there during your career, especially at the early onset of it, because I'm from that era too. You didn't see all these guys on YouTube or TikTok, you know, booting balls 60, 70, 80 yards off a tee, or with a little placeholder ball holder there, and then people kind of commenting like, "Wow, like how is this guy not in the NFL and stuff?" What do you say to people who look at those videos and are like, "I don't understand. Like, why isn't that guy in the NFL?" Are you kind of like, "Listen, there's a lot more to it than just being able to kick a ball off a holder in an empty field with not, no 50,000 people cheering and trying to throw you off your game." Like, how do you respond to that stuff?
Well, yeah, yeah, yes. Exactly kind of where you were going with that is exactly how I respond to that. Is the fact that when guys there's a lot of athletic guys out there, and I've told many people this before in my whole career, or even when I'm coaching. I'm like, listen, yes, I was at the highest level of football in the world. Yes, I led the NFL in scoring 1 year. Yes, I went to a Pro Bowl. Yes, I kicked a 59-yard field goal in a game in a dome. Yes, I did some really cool stuff, right? I was once the most accurate kicker in NFL history, blah, 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 right? Well, I'm telling you, I'm saying not to impress you. I'm trying to tell you, I'm trying to press upon you that someone like me could do that, because I'm not a great athlete. And I'm here to tell you that there are so many much, much more better kickers than me in the world, like on their own, like your examples you just gave. Guys that are incredibly athletic, that just absolutely. I've done charting events with Michael Husted and pro camps, and I've seen some of the most impressive kickers I've ever seen in my life in practice.
Keywords.
Then you put like the whole week of charting. They have to, like, for example, Michael Husted used to run a pro camp, and we would do 2 or 3 days of charting, and third day was really kind of a makeup day or whatever. If they didn't qualify the first 2 days, they had a chance to qualify on the third. But if they did on the third, they wouldn't have to kick on the third. That coaches would be there. This NFL scouts and coaches would be on the fourth day. That was their pro day, right? Well, that's when they had to they had to qualify to kick in front of those coaches, but they had to be good enough to kick in front of the coaches, obviously, because they had to qualify. But my point is that some of these guys that qualified with ease, are kicking really good, and I'm charting. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a monster kick,
Yeah.
Then they get in front of the coaches, and even those situations, we didn't have. Well, not all the kicks were snaps and holds.
Okay.
Most of them, maybe half or so, maybe a little bit more than half, were actually just from the sticks, or actually, I'm sorry, that's a lie, from a holder, from an actual
Right.
person that put the ball down and held it, just like a holder would catch and snap
Sure,
without the snap. And even in those situations, again, it goes all the way back to my first point about trying too hard, doing something different just because it matters. Why would you do that? And again, I understand why you do it. I did it too as a kid. Even as maybe in the pros, even at the NFL level, I was insecure about my practice, my warm up. Maybe I had a really bad week of practice, and I just was not really confident with myself. But that's the thing, is that there's so many guys out there that's so good, and really it's not really the players coming at you on a field goal protection and block, in a game when they're blocking you and they're coming at you to block the kick. It's not the roar of the crowd. It's not the fact that you're on live TV. In my opinion, it's not. It's the snap and the hold. It's the operation in 1.3 seconds. That's really where, the biggest difference between a guy that can kick off sticks, basically a little mechanical holder, and kick really well, and then that same guy kicking with a live snap and hold, is that there's a timing process that you have to get good at and used to. You have to be much quicker than you could, you can, there's an ease to kicking on your own without a snap and hold, because you go when you want to go. And there's a lot of other variables, clearly. But when you're forced to go when the ball is snapped, and you're having to rush, and you're having to kick, and you're having to make sure to make the kick, or try your best to make the kick, things change. And that's really what separates really good kickers who can handle that and not change much. And obviously you need to practice. There's, when you could ask the question, how does the snapper affect your rhythm on a field goal, and the holder too? It's a huge deal.
Oh yeah.
I really feel bad for teams that have to rotate snappers or rotate holders, because you really want to have that good camaraderie and meshing and kind of camaraderie is really not the word for it, but you kind of do, clearly, because nowadays they have snappers only that just snap the ball, and then you got your punter, who's a holder typically, and then you got the kicker. So the three of them just walk around the fields and work out together all day long. And they get that extra time, a lot of extra time to
Yeah.
get the rhythm down. And that's really where I'm going with that. Is there's a certain rhythm when you get snaps and holds.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of other sports that you see, like baseball, pitchers and catchers have a certain rapport that they're able to build by practicing together and performing in games together. And also got 5 players on a basketball court. There's a certain rhythm, a certain tempo that they all kind of get used to when they're playing with each other. Same thing for kickers, snappers, and holders. I think it makes sense. Um, how did you prepare? I mean, what were some of your weekly preparations? You mentioned that uh, part of your routine was to develop this timing and this rhythm. How did you do that in a practice setting in the days leading up to your games?
Well, just get as much work with the snapper and holder as you possibly can, and that's really where you're. It depends on the team, and really when at the professional level, if I were to ask my snapper, hey, can you stay after practice a little long? I know they have meetings, I get that, so I would make sure I would respect their time. But if I needed extra work or something, like, hey man, I just need some extra snaps and holds, and yeah, at the high school level and even college level, sometimes a little bit more difficult because guys just don't do that. They just don't think it's necessary. But I'm telling you, it is. But that, I mean, there's really nothing different. I mean, there's the preparation is the same every single week. You get pretty much the same amount of reps every single week, depending on what team you're on, depending on their routine as far as their practice routine. Wednesdays were typically our field goal block days. Thursdays were kickoff coverage or whatever, kickoff return. Pumps thrown in there, and then Fridays was kind of like a mixture of everything. But it's just a matter of just the teams kind of coordinating the special teams practice portions and what they're actually focusing on, and it's all about that. But again, you do have time on your own. Like back when I played, Brian Barker was my holder and Brian Mormon was my holder at the two Bills and then the Jaguars, of course. But and the Chris Hansen, of course, when he was here my last year in Jacksonville. But you walk around with them, and that year I had Joe Zelinka as well, and that was in 2002. That was the first year that the Jaguars actually had a snapper, just a snapper. But it's just to get as much work as you possibly can with those guys just to get that down. It's really that simple.
So a lot of the perception with kickers is that they're just kind of hanging around the locker room. They're kind of just strutting around the field, checking out things, and kind of not quite under the lens of the coach and the coaching staff, because they're kind of off there to the side doing their own thing, working out with their netting and whatever. But I mean, they're athletes just like everybody else on the field. How did you go about dealing with injury prevention, which is what really we focus on here in this podcast, but also something that you had brought up earlier? You talked a little bit, you mentioned briefly about your back. How were you able to do a lot of your injury prevention stuff?
Well, it was a lifestyle thing, really. It was flexibility was important for me. There was periods of time where I would spend a lot of time with my hamstrings and my glutes maybe, but I neglected my hip flexors, and I didn't realize it till Mike Ryan, our trainer with the Jaguars, said, man, you got to get your hip flexors more flexible. And so I started working on those, and so again, it's the flexibility, it's the strength, a lot of core workouts in the weight room. A lot of things that you're supporting the core strength and the flexibility, but the combination of those two things really would be the best you could do. And of course, eating good. There was many times when I didn't eat great, but supplements, things like that, just things that will joint help, curcumin or turmeric, whatever. But they didn't have that kind of stuff back in the day when I played. Sure. So that wasn't really available. But I just, whatever I did, just stay hydrated. Yep. Definitely hydrated. That's one big thing that a lot of kids neglect, and especially people that athletes in colder weather. That's one thing I did learn is like, man, you're not thirsty. when you're in, playing in cold weather conditions, and maybe you're living in like Buffalo. When I was in Buffalo, I constantly reminded myself, or I had to at least to drink, just drink water, because you don't get thirsty, and so therefore there's really no need for you to drink as far as your body's concerned. But your body should be, getting a lot of fluids clearly. So just those things.
And so the back was something that inevitably became a problem for you in your career. You had to deal with a lot of back issues. You mentioned your hip flexors, and Yeah, those are huge when it comes to dealing with back problems. A lot of times you can directly correlate hip flexor tightness with lower back issues. Um, Tell us a little bit about what you experienced with your lower back and how that affected your ability in the field.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been, as I mentioned before, I think, as a kid doing like silly things, jumping off houses, jumping off, 100-foot cliffs into water, and just, um, just a lot of, strange, just things that we were just stupid, and just, we were very active as a neighborhood, clan, we'll call ourselves. We rode BMX bikes, we had big jumps, and we would crash all the time. But skiing is kind of where it started. I was a
Okay.
pretty big slow skier back in the day. But going into, kicking, and then, it started to kind of bother me in college a little bit. And then I was diagnosed with a slightly herniated disc, L4, L5 disc area was a little bit herniated. So I was, doing some treatment and therapy for it. A lot of kickers will have, back issues just because of the range of motion and the lateralness in the spine, of course, with the kicking with just one leg, of course. But even though my style is more forward and I try not to turn, I don't want to turn too much. It still was to a point. And again, I wasn't very good with the technique that I really got good at. I didn't really learn all of it until probably like my latter years in college. So
Okay.
all the way through high school and even college, and even, early on in the NFL, I was still turning a little bit more than I should have. And I was still kind of learning. It was still a learning process, but the back issues just got a little worse over time. And again, when I was with Jacksonville, early on, we had a strength coach that was pretty adamant about, it was kind of an old school kind of coach. He had us lifting heavy weights, even the kickers. And going back to my program, we worked out with the DBs and the quarterbacks. Okay. So if I'm in there, I look at the DBs workout and I'm looking down his list, I'm looking down my list, and there's only 2 that are different out of the 12 workouts we have on there. I'm like, I've only got 2 different ones than you do. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And all they were was core stuff, like lateral twists and just the stuff that had to do with my core. But everything else was heavy squats, heavy power cleans, all kinds of like, things like that
Yeah.
I didn't really. I just did them because I was part of the team. Again, trying to be a team player, and didn't want
Sure.
to, he's the strength coach for a reason. He must know what he's doing,
Yeah.
But however, I threw my back out a million times in the weight room doing heavy squats and heavy power cleans, and finally got to the point where my back was really hurting, and I think it was in 1998 season. It was after my Pro Bowl year. My back flared up that year, and I was on a lot of, I was taking a lot of anti-inflammatories. I literally had, I believe, 3 epidurals, and this is the entire season. Okay, I
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
3 epidurals and 2 nerve root blocks.
Oh, wow.
So I had 5 cortisone shots essentially that year, and you understand the
Yeah.
effectiveness of that. You're not supposed to have more than 3 every year, something like that, or if that.
Yeah. Well, the spine's a little different because they can kind of, get different areas of the vertebrae and around the nerve roots there. So there's a little bit more leeway when you're talking about the lumbar sacral
Okay.
spine and the nerve roots. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's still, I mean, if you're having to do that every couple of weeks or every week, like then that's spelling a trouble.
yeah, that was a tough season for me
Yeah.
because I couldn't do much. I just had to kind of suffer through it, and then I had my first surgery at the end of the season. So I played
Okay.
through all the pain and did all, everything I could to just get through the season. Then I had surgery in January of '99, I believe it was.
Okay.
That was my first, and then I had one not too, like in 2000, not too much. Maybe after I went through the whole. I don't even think I lasted a whole season, and out of nowhere, like the um, second game of the year against the Ravens, something happened. My back was really messed up, and I had 5 field goals in that game, but I was in so much pain. And a lot of nerve pain down my left leg at that point, and that's when I had to go in for my second surgery. I was actually trying to play through it. We had
Yeah.
that next week they put me on a Medro dose pack, right? So I'm
Yep.
taking a bunch of pills on the first day. It's like 6 pills day 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, all the way down to. But I couldn't take anything else, and I was living on Advil. Like Advil was my best friend. It was the only thing that really worked for me. Of all the access we had to all the medications and anti-inflammatories, I didn't get into any painkillers because clearly I don't. I mean, I'm smart enough to know that that's a Band-Aid. And even the team told me, it's like, listen, if we get into the hydrocodones or things like that, we gotta reevaluate and think about what we need to do next.
Yeah.
But I never got there, so that was good. But that week was a struggle. And that's when I had that, like the night before the game, we were supposed to play I was supposed to play the Bengals with the Jaguars that Sunday, but we had a kickoff specialist by the name of Steve Lindsay. He was in, and, because of my back the way it was, they hired a guy and I wasn't the greatest kickoff guy. So they had a guy. Steve was really good. He had a great leg, and he actually, so it worked out great for the team because I did go into surgery that next day. So I went to the team meeting on Saturday night thinking I was going to play because I'm a dude. I'm stubborn. I'm like, I got this. I'll wake up in the morning feeling great. Nope.
Yeah.
I had a lot of nerve pain down my left leg. I still have some numbness in my calf, like it's like a superficial numbness on the skin.
Even to this day?
Yeah, to this
day.
Oh,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, permanent numbness on my calf from that injury. But so I didn't make it to the game. They checked me in the hospital. I literally watched the game that I was supposed to be playing in. I watched it from the hospital bed.
Oh, that's a bad
Yeah,
feeling.
Kind of sucked. I was in traction, of course. They're pulling my legs with traction, of course. And I'm watching the game I'm supposed to be in. But Steve did well. And, I was out I had surgery the next day, and I was only out for 4 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I got in the first game they threw me back in was it was my decision too. I wanted to be back, and it was a Monday night game against the Titans in Tennessee. So my first field goal was like 48 yards. I'm like, oh my gosh,
that's a test if nothing else, right?
yeah.
And I'm assuming what they did. What did they do? Like some micro discectomies and stuff.
Exactly.
Nothing major where they fused your spine, because otherwise you would have been.
No, just micro discectomy, laminectomy.
Yeah.
On 2 levels though, L4, L5, and then the part that was the worst part, and even to this day, the lowest disc, L5 S1 is almost gone.
And those are the most common levels when we're talking about lumbar sacral lower back stuff. It's always the L4, L5, L5, S1. So not unusual, unfortunately, a story to hear. When it comes to low back stuff, which is some of the most difficult things, not only to go through as an athlete, but also to treat as a provider. I mean, it's like so hard. There's only so much you can do. Like you said, too many injections. At some point, you're like, okay, where do we go from here? When do you bite the bullet and decide to do the surgery? When do you say no and continue with the rehab? How do you fight through that pain? Because it can be debilitating. And I mean, I've been through it myself as an injured person. And I have a new respect for it after that. As a provider, you're like, man, I know what you're going through now. It's not fun. Inevitably, unfortunately, this kind of was the thing that probably shut you down toward the end of your career. But this is a cool story, and maybe you can kind of bring this to the forefront here. You made a return, like recently too. Like I didn't realize how recent this was, but like within the last few years, you actually came back to kick in an arena league. At like how old? 50? You were 50?
It was last year. It was last June. It was 2 Junes ago. And I had just turned 50 in May, and I played a game on June 3rd for the hometown Jacksonville Sharks of the National Arena League. I know one of the owners of the team. He actually hit me up. I reached out to him prior to the season. I don't know. It might have been even the year before I reached out to him, because I was coaching a couple kickers, and one of them, a couple kickers of the arena caliper, and that were living here in Jacksonville, and one of them wanted to get into the arena and just kick around and see how he could do, because he never kicked in an arena before. And so I called up my guy, and I texted him actually and said, I think you guys are at home. Can we get in there and I want to see how my kicker does. I want to, wants to kick a little bit. He's pretty good. You might want to take a look at him too. And I said, I'll bring my shoe out too, and I'll strap up my shoes and play around too. Because with my kicking academy, I'm always demonstrating. Because again, the things that I teach are a lot of it. I have to show these kids that it actually works, because if I told you, if I did a certain thing with the ball and my approach and the way I swung, you'd say, there's no way that ball's supposed to go where it's supposed to go, where I'm telling them it's going. So I feel that I have to show them, and I enjoy it. I like, there's not many kicking coaches out there that actually will demonstrate for their kids anymore, not let alone a 50 or 51-year-old coach. Like anytime, any given day, without even stretching, without even shoes on, I'll go out and I'll kick. I'm not going to kick a bunch, but usually I'm kicking off a tee, so it's not as bad. But so I did play a game, and it was weird, because he hit me up. He goes, we'll try to figure that out. And something happened. The ball was dropped somewhere, and we never got in the arena. But he texted me before the beginning of the following season, and he said, hey, were you serious about that text last year? And I said, yeah, I'm still working with the same guy. I want to get him in there to, kick around a little bit. He goes, no, not about him, about you. And he said, "What do you mean about me?" He goes, "Would you want to kick?" And I'm like, "What do you mean for you, for the Sharks?" He goes, "Yes." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So I went through a training camp a little bit, and it was so funny because and they had a kid by the name of Brandon Bear on the team who was a guy that I actually coached, and he was really good. And I'm like, why do you guys want me to come in? Like almost like maybe a publicity thing for
Right.
them. I don't know, but I enjoyed it. It was fun. I had maybe 4 days of training camp. That's all they really had as far as kickers were concerned. And Brandon actually beat me out, and I'm like, I was totally fine with it. I'm like, you
Yeah.
know what, this is probably not meant to be. I
Yeah.
am 50. I was 49 at the time. But later on in that same season, they released Brandon. They picked up somebody else. So I'm like, okay, well then really they don't want me. That's fine.
Right.
That's perfectly fine. I'm good watching the game on the couch, honestly. But then that guy kind of, I don't know, he struggled a little bit, but he was hurt. So I think that was part of it.
Yeah.
I got the call from Nick, and Nick says, "Hey man, would you want to come in and play?" I'm like, like right now? Or he says, "Are you ready?" I said, "Well, I've been kind of messing around a little bit ever since I did the training camp thing." And so, yeah, so I took it. Yeah, I said, "Sure, I'll get in there and play." So I went on, I signed the contract again, another contract. And then, went through, 2 or 3 days of practice, and then jumped right into the game. And I don't know if it was just that game. I don't, we scored 70 something points in that game. I counted afterwards. I lost count during the game. I wasn't even counting anyways, but I kicked the ball 22 times in that game.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I was 50 years old, right? So yeah.
After that, you're probably like, okay, I think it's really time I hang it up now.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you around halftime, I realized there was a point in my career that, I retired because my back, it was really a mental struggle. It was a physical struggle. It was painful. And I was just, I gotta hang them up.
Yeah.
I remembered about halftime why I originally retired from the NFL, because my back was reminding me, like, man, what are you doing?
Yeah, you were probably just running on adrenaline that whole first half, and when you had time to kind of settle down.
The more I stayed on my feet, the longer I was on my feet, the more my back started locking up, and it was just really tight. It was tough to stay loose. And I'm telling you, the next day and the next day and the next day after the game, like 3 days in a row, my whole body was shot. So I'm like, yeah. I called the coach. I said, is your kicker okay? Is he going to be okay to play this week?
Please tell me.
He's fine. I said, good, because I'm going to retire again.
That's a great story, though. What a cool way to kind of end it, huh?
Yeah, it was fun. It was a blast. I had a good time.
So how did you any advice like for younger athletes out there that are maybe dealing with an injury? How did you kind of push through, and where'd you kind of get that fortitude to kind of work your way back each time from those surgeries and get back out there and kind of put it behind you and kind of focus on what you were doing? And was there any tips or tricks or advice?
Well, at the NFL level, you kind of have no choice. But I would tell any kid this: listen to your trainers and do exactly what they tell you to do, and do more. It's a lot of hard work. Rehabilitation is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I got in some of the best shape. As a matter of fact, when I was with the Giants and I got on an injury reserve my first year out of my 5-year contract, when I went through after my third and fourth surgery, I had actually a staph infection from the third surgery, which was an awful experience. But I lived, which they told me at the time afterwards that it was kind of a pretty deadly staph that I had. I'm like, oh, thanks. I had a PICC line and everything for 6 weeks. I was taking medication. Yeah,
that's serious.
It was pretty serious. But throughout my rehab, though, I got in great shape. I was like, man, this is like, because our trainer was just kicking my butt, and I loved it though. So that's the thing. A piece of advice really is just take it serious, do what they say. Don't, there's a lot of kids, and even I struggle with this too, telling my kids, stretch, do the splits. The splits, I'm not doing it. Do the splits. They don't want to do the splits, but because it takes work, it hurts. I get it. I did it too, but do it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the advice, is just kind of do, be flexible, have core strength and work on that core strength to keep you from getting injured again. But, it's just a matter of staying disciplined with everything that the trainers and doctors are telling you to do, and just do it and focus on, obviously the good technique. Don't overdo your kicking, and even any athlete out there would agree that, obviously you don't want to jump into it too early. I know that there's two sides of athletes, really, especially at the NFL level. Well, kind of at the NFL level. There's athletes that just are team players that just love to play and win and want to play regardless if they're injured or not.
Yeah.
And the other ones are like, yeah, I'm just kind of maybe sugarcoat it a little bit, like, oh, it's hurting, I can't practice today because it hurts. There's those kind of guys too. But that everyone has their own little differences with regards to playing time and stuff. And I'm telling you, at the NFL level, you're an investment for the team and the coaches. So every day, Tom Coughlin would come down in the training room and see all the guys sitting in the training room and tell them to get back on the field. Come on, we got to get on the field. I don't care how you broken leg or not, get out there.
Yeah, I'm sure Coughlin wasn't so subtle about it either.
Yeah.
So awesome stories. Now you set the bar pretty high there in Jacksonville. I mean, you were there for quite a while. You were with a new organization that formed. Do you still hold a lot of their scoring records and kicking records?
Scobie came in and blew me out after 10 or 11 years, 10 years, I think he played here. The thing I got, it took him 8 years to do what I did in 7. So what I'm saying is I became, I was 7 years here as a Jaguar. I held that, all-time scoring record for a long time, but it took him 8 years to do what I got in 7 and beat me as far as my record. But scoring records, no, I'm not up there anymore. I mean, like second place, I guess, but with regards to the one record that no other kicker in the NFL or Jaguar history will ever break was the first points in franchise history. That will never be broken.
There you go. Perfect.
I'll always have one.
And that's a good one to have. I mean, that'll be in the record books forever.
And Scobie just destroyed my longest was only like 53, and he just nailed a 59-yarder for a game winner against the Colts. I was actually there. He kicked it right at me. And I was a fan, of course, watching it play. But
but he didn't score the first points in franchise history, and they'll never take that away from you, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Pretty cool. Are you still involved with the organization at all? Do you still kind of work with them at all, consult for them or anything, or help them out?
I mean, I don't consult with them. We're part of an ambassador group. So, matter of fact, this weekend is our Legends weekend. But unfortunately, I don't know how to take this. But I'm going to be on a cruise. I earned an incentive cruise. This company I'm working in.
Okay.
And so I'll be in the Bahamas or actually a Western Caribbean cruise in Mexico and stuff. So, nice. But there we have, I think, over 100 former Jaguars coming back to town.
Cool.
A lot of them are actually here in town. Nice. I've been a part of this ambassador group for quite a while, and we have a good number of people that players that were Jaguars at one point, and maybe have, whether they retired here and stayed here, or they've gone to other teams, and then when they actually retire, they actually come back to Jacksonville. So nice. A lot of guys from older teams, and some of them I don't recognize them. I recognize the name maybe from watching them play, but some of them I'm like, who is that again? So we're getting as an older team now,
nice.
We're getting a lot of players coming back.
Yeah, well, we'll have to talk off camera. Maybe we'll get some of those guys on the show. Now tell me a little bit more about your ProForm Kicking Academy. This is a thing you've got kind of on the side. Is this your full-time thing, or you've got kind of a side gig that you do with this? Or
this hasn't. It had been kind of a full-time thing for me for quite a while. I've always dabbled in different things. I consider myself an entrepreneur, and I've had this kicking academy for 18 years almost. So. Okay. And the guy, Jim Gaetano, was the coach that I had that taught me everything I know about kicking and punting. And he actually, we played for the same high school football coach, but at different times and at different schools in Spokane. So we're both from Spokane. That's how when I got in, and he actually came out to the school when I was in high school and worked with me a little bit. And then I didn't see him for a couple of years when I went off to junior college. And then I met up with him again halfway through my junior year at University of Idaho. Saw him at the game. He, said hi to me after, at halftime even. It wasn't even like, "Hey, Jim, how's it going?" He's like, "Hey, that one extra point you had, it didn't go straight." I'm like, he started pushing me right through there.
Once a coach, always a coach.
Yeah. I'm like, "Hey, Jim, let's have a conversation first before." But he's here coaching with me, and so he does. I mean, that's all he wants to do, and he loves it. I mean, he's so passionate about coaching, and so I don't always have to be out coaching. And so I've also done other stuff with a proactive wellness company now. It's called 3 International. And we have innovative delivery technologies in the supplements that we offer, and bioavailability is really good, and all plant-based, all natural, really good products. And we're only 8 months old, and nice. It's a direct sales company. So we're just new. We're brand new to the market, but doing very well. And so that was where the cruise, that was the incentive cruise that I won. But so my kicking academy, I've been doing for, like I said, 17 years. And, here in Jacksonville, of course, I do virtual as well, but like I said, the stuff that I teach is it's advanced. I do have kids, in high school, middle school, even some college kids, obviously if they're from here or during the time they're not in college, they'll work with me a little bit when they're coming back during the off season or whatever. But I enjoy it. I really do. It's a passion of mine. I want to, give kids the idea. And one of the things I always open up with when I'm working with a new kid, I say, look at me first off. Usually I say usually because I'm not a real big guy. I'm like 5'7" on 5'8" on a good day. I'm telling you, with all my back issues, I think I'm shrinking. I swear I was 5'8" at one point. But I tell them, I say, look at me, I'm 5'8", and usually they're taller than me because I'm just a short guy, right? Even in middle school, sometimes they're taller than me. And I say, I'm not a real big guy. I'm not freakishly athletic. I'm not big and strong. I played in the NFL. I told them all those things I was mentioning to you, and I say, I want you to understand that somebody is like me, was able to do what I did, and it wasn't because of those three or four things I just mentioned, because I'm not. I'm not a real big athletic guy. I'm not real freakishly tall and big and strong. And I'm just an average athlete that got good at a technique. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what your athletic ability is. I mean, you have to have some to kick a ball somewhat decently, but you can get very good. And that was really my goal. When I started learning this form, it became a passion of mine to learn it and be as good as I possibly could be. And that kind of transfers into my mentality of where exactly or how high of a level of kicking I wanted to get to. And clearly I wanted to be the best that I could physically myself. And that's why I tell kids too. So listen, if you have really good athletic ability and you kick athletically, you're only going to be as good as your athletic ability. And as long as it lasts. Now you might be a real good kicker, but if you're not very good of an athlete and you're relying on athletic ability, you're probably not going to be a very good kicker. So let's try to do some good technique. And so if you're not a great athlete, if you have good technique, you can be a really good kicker. And so do as much as you can with the technique and get as good as you physically can be kicking a football. And then that is your maximum. You can't do any better than your best. And whatever level that gets you to, you have to be happy with. And that's exactly what my mentality was growing up as a kid. Even I never thought about playing the NFL when I was in high school. Not even my first couple of years in college, I think about NFL. I didn't think about NFL until maybe my senior year of college, because I started timing kickoffs. But man, my hang time's just as good as these guys, and they're kicking off a 3-inch tee back then.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, man, I got a good leg. I could give this a shot, and so I did, and things worked out.
Awesome. And if anybody wants to reach out to you or has some interest in hearing more information about your kicking academy, I'll make sure I have all the notes and everything and links in the show notes, everybody. So if you are looking for some advice or want to maybe get a coaching program going, you can check out the show notes. Mike, thanks for joining us. It's been a great conversation. And there's one more thing I wanted to ask you. I used to have a segment on my podcast that I called the Throckmorton Injury of the Week. And it's a satirical medical thing. I'll let you look that up on your own time. And it was always like a weird or funny story that caused an injury to an athlete. And I had done one a few years ago, and it involved the Jacksonville Jaguar player, a kicker, by the name of Chris Hansen, who you mentioned earlier. And I'm wondering if you can maybe validate this story for me, because it sounds almost crazy to be true. And this might have been a little bit after your time. I'm not sure. Head coach Jack Del Rio put apparently a stump in the locker room, and Chris Hansen was taking a whack at it with an axe and missed.
That is a true story. That was Jack Del Rio's kind of his concept of chipping away throughout the season. We're gonna take this axe and every once in a while, guys, just take a little whack at the axe or at the log with the axe, and we're gonna chip away at the season. Before the end of the season, this log will be almost gone, or maybe I don't know exactly what his philosophy was, but yes, that did happen. Chris, he didn't have much luck. Here's another story maybe you do not know about that I can add to this. Obviously, you've taken that one. That is kind of a story that was kind of, and I think somebody else got hurt by the axe too.
Oh my gosh!
He finally took the log out of the locker room and the axe and said, "Okay, that's not working. Let's try something different." However, Chris Hansen, and the poor guy, and I hate to even share the story, but he laughs about it now. Him and his wife and another kicker and his wife, after I left, of course, can't remember who that was, the other kicker, but they were at Chris's house doing fondue, right? So they had this really, really hot oil.
Jarrett Holmes.
Jared, yes.
Yep.
And so they were, yes. So Chris was taking, and I asked him, obviously after it happened, he was all distraught, and I let the dust settle for a month or so, and then finally asked him, and he gave me the whole story. And yeah, he was moving the big pot of oil from one table to another, and it slipped out of his hands, fell, landed on the kitchen floor, and splashed everybody. And his wife got the worst of it.
Oh, really?
But it burned a lot of, burnt Chris, his wife, and I don't know if anyone else did, but yeah, the poor guy had some bad luck sometimes, but he laughs about it now. We can all just, that happened. What are you going to do?
Yeah, crazy story. But it was one of many that I've shared on that segment, which I don't do as much anymore, but I had to ask it since I had you on the show, just to at least confirm whether or not it was true. And you've done that for me, so I thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Hollis, former kicker for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Pro Bowler, record holder, entrepreneur, businessman, coach. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Injured List podcast. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Welcome to the Injured List podcast, where sports meet science. Are you a sports fanatic or a fantasy sports enthusiast? If so, you're in the right place. At the Injured List podcast, we dive deep into the world of sports injuries. From the latest news to in-depth breakdowns, we keep you informed about your favorite athlete's health and its impact on the game. But it's not just about injuries. We go beyond the sidelines with exclusive interviews. Hear directly from the pros, gain insights into their recovery journeys, and learn about the cutting-edge techniques from experts in sports medicine. Calling all fantasy sports enthusiasts, we know how crucial injury updates are for your fantasy team. Get the edge with our expert advice and stay ahead in your leagues. Don't miss out on the action. Subscribe now to the Injured List podcast. Stay informed, stay ahead, follow us on social media, and join the conversation. Your journey into the intersection of sports and science starts here.